the scent of freshly cut grass, usually a comforting aroma in the meticulously maintained community of Willow Creek, today felt like a prelude to a storm. Zia, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that mirrored her perpetually serious expression, gripped her pruning shears with a white-knuckled intensity. Her gaze, sharp and unwavering, swept across the perfect emerald lawn of her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, before settling on the offending marigold. It was a cheerful, vibrant orange, utterly out of place amidst Mrs. Henderson's carefully curated bed of pale yellow petunias and delicate white impatiens. The Willow Creek Homeowners Association covenants, specifically Article 7, Section C, Subsection 3, clearly stated, all floral arrangements in front-facing garden beds must adhere to a harmonious, muted color palette, avoiding stark contrasts or overly flamboyant hues. The marigold, in Zia's expert opinion, was a flamboyant hue. Zia was the unofficial, yet undeniably most influential, arbiter of taste and order in Willow Creek. For 23 years, she had resided in the corner house, directly across from the community's pristine, if rarely used, clubhouse. Her tenure on the HOA board stretched back almost as far, a continuous reign marked by an unwavering commitment to the bylaws and an almost supernatural ability to spot a rogue lawn gnome or an unapproved shade of exterior paint from 2 blocks away. Her home, a stately colonial with not a single blade of grass out of place, served as a testament to her principles. Every shrub was precisely trimmed, every window gleamed, and the seasonal wreath on her front door was always tasteful, never ostentatious. Today, however, a different kind of marigold, one of discord, was blooming in Willow Creek, and it wasn't in Mrs. Henderson's garden. It was in the form of a brightly painted, undeniably cheerful, and utterly unsanctioned mural on the side of the newly acquired food truck belonging to the community's newest resident, Mateo Rodriguez. Mateo, a whirlwind of youthful energy and entrepreneurial spirit, had moved into the modest bungalow on Elm Street just 3 months prior. He was a chef, a culinary artist, and his dream was to bring gourmet street food to Willow Creek. His food truck, Mateo's Munchies, was a testament to his vibrant personality. Adorned with a sprawling, colorful mural depicting stylized chilies, avocados, and a smiling sun, it was a beacon of joy, and to Zia, a glaring violation of Article 5, Section B, Subsection 1. All commercial vehicles parked within the community must be unadorned and of a neutral color palette, blending seamlessly with the residential aesthetic. The truck, currently parked in Mateo's driveway, was anything but seamless. It was a riot of crimson, lime green, and sunflower yellow against the muted beige of his bungalow. It was an affront to the carefully cultivated tranquility of Willow Creek, a visual shout in a community that prided itself on its hushed elegance. Zia finished her mental inventory of Mrs. Henderson's garden, deciding to address the marigold at the next HOA meeting. For now, Mateo's Munchies took precedence. She marched back into her immaculate home, her sensible loafers clicking purposefully on the polished hardwood floors. Her husband, Arthur, a mild-mannered man whose primary role in life seemed to be nodding agreeably at Zia's pronouncements, looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Arthur," Zia announced, her voice a low, resonant hum of disapproval, "the Rodriguez situation has escalated." Arthur sighed almost imperceptibly. He knew that tone. Has he painted another chili on it, dear?" "Worse," Zia said, retrieving a crisp white envelope from a drawer in her mahogany desk. "He has ignored the first 2 notices. The mural remains. And furthermore, I observed him this morning, selling his gourmet street food directly from the driveway." Arthur's eyebrows rose. "From the driveway? But isn't that against the rules?" "Precisely," Zia affirmed, a steely glint in her eye. "Article 8, Section A, Subsection 2. No commercial activities, including but not limited to the sale of goods or services, shall be conducted from private residences within the Willow Creek community." She held up the envelope. "This is the final warning. If he does not comply, we will be forced to impose fines. And if those are ignored..." She left the threat hanging in the air, unspoken but clearly understood. Eviction. The thought of Mateo, with his boisterous laughter and his ridiculously colorful food truck, being forced out of Willow Creek, sent a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor through Arthur. He liked Mateo. He liked his food, too, though he'd only ever bought it in secret, when Zia was at her weekly bridge club. Mateo's pulled pork sliders were, in Arthur's humble opinion, a culinary masterpiece. "Perhaps, dear," Arthur ventured, "we could try talking to him again. He seems like a reasonable young man." Zia scoffed. "Reasonable men do not paint giant avocados on their vehicles, Arthur." Reasonable men read the covenants before purchasing property in a prestigious community like Willow Creek. She tapped the envelope decisively. "No, the time for talking is over. It is time for action." Across the meticulously manicured lawns, Mateo Rodriguez, oblivious to the storm brewing in Zia's colonial home, wiped his hands on a clean towel. He just finished serving his last customer of the morning, Mrs. Albright, who had, despite her initial apprehension, declared his breakfast tacos simply divine. The mural on his food truck, a vibrant explosion of color, glistened under the morning sun. He loved it. It represented everything he was trying to build: joy, flavor, and a little bit of unexpected excitement in a world that sometimes felt a little too beige. He glanced at the 2 official-looking envelopes sitting on his kitchen counter, unopened. He'd meant to read them, really he had, but there was always another order to fill, another recipe to perfect. He'd get to them eventually. For now, the aroma of spicy chorizo and sizzling peppers was far more compelling than legal jargon. He whistled a cheerful tune, completely unaware that the harmony of Willow Creek was about to be irrevocably shattered by a single, determined woman and a very colorful food truck. Mateo, however, did not get to the envelopes eventually. The next morning, a crisp, official-looking letter, distinct from the previous 2, was slipped under his door. It was not a warning. It was a formal notice of violation, accompanied by a fine of $100 per day until the mural was removed and the commercial activity ceased. The letter also stated, in no uncertain terms, that continued noncompliance would result in further escalating fines and, ultimately, legal action. The cheerful tune died on Mateo's lips as he read the stark black and white. He stared at the letter, then at his beloved food truck, its vibrant colors mocking the grim pronouncement. He had poured his life savings, his heart, and his soul into Mateo's munchies. This wasn't just a vehicle, it was his dream, his livelihood. A wave of anger, hot and unfamiliar, washed over him. He wasn't some delinquent. He was a small business owner, trying to bring something positive to the community. He had seen the smiles on people's faces, heard the compliments. Mrs. Albright, Mrs. Peterson, even old Mr. Abernathy, who usually just grunted, had praised his huevos rancheros. Determined to understand, Mateo decided to confront the source of this bureaucratic onslaught. He asked Mrs. Albright, who he'd learned was a longtime resident, about the HOA. "Oh dear," she'd said, her voice laced with a familiar Willow Creek apprehension. "You're dealing with Zia. She runs the place, bless her heart." "Just do what she says, Mateo. It'll save you a lot of trouble." But Mateo wasn't one to back down. He valued his dream too much. He marched directly to the address listed on the letter, Zia's colonial home. The house was as immaculate as he'd imagined, every bush perfectly sculpted, every window gleaming. He rang the doorbell. Zia, in a tailored pantsuit and with her silver hair pulled back even tighter than usual, answered the door. Her eyes, the color of steel, narrowed slightly as she recognized him. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "To what do I owe this unscheduled visit?" "Mrs. Prescott," Mateo began, trying to keep his voice even, "I received this." He held up the notice. "I don't understand. I'm just trying to run my business, serve good food." "My truck. It's part of my brand, my identity." Zia merely raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Rodriguez, when you purchased property in Willow Creek, you agreed to abide by the covenants." Article 5, Section B, Subsection 1, regarding commercial vehicles, and Article 8, Section A, Subsection 2, regarding commercial activities. Both are quite clear. But it's just a mural, Mateo pleaded. And I'm selling to my neighbors, people who live here. They like it. The bylaws do not make exceptions for artistic expression or neighborly preferences, Mr. Rodriguez, Zia stated, her tone unwavering. They are in place to preserve the aesthetic integrity and residential character of Willow Creek. Your truck, with its flamboyant display, and your driveway sales are in direct violation. You have been given ample warning. But the fines are crippling, Mateo exclaimed, his frustration finally breaking through. And if I remove the mural, my truck loses its identity. It's not just a food truck. It's Mateo's Munchies. Then perhaps Willow Creek is not the appropriate location for Mateo's Munchies, Zia concluded, her voice flat. She began to close the door. Mateo, desperate, quickly interjected, "Is there no other option?" "A compromise? What if I only serve a few hours a day? What if I park in the community lot?" Zia paused, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. The community lot is for residential parking only. As for a compromise, the bylaws are not open to negotiation, Mr. Rodriguez. You either comply or you face the consequences. She then firmly, but politely, closed the door. Mateo stood on the pristine porch, feeling the weight of the freshly cut grass, the perfectly trimmed shrubs, and Zia's unyielding resolve pressing down on him. He felt a profound sense of helplessness. He tried calling other HOA board members, but they all deferred to Zia, citing her long-standing experience and dedication to the community. It was clear she held absolute sway. The following week, Mateo tried to comply in part. He continued to operate from his driveway, but only for a few hours in the evening, hoping to avoid Zia's morning patrols. He even draped a large, neutral-colored tarp over the mural when he wasn't actively selling, a sad attempt to appease the aesthetic gods of Willow Creek. But the fines continued to pile up, accruing daily. Each day, another $100 added to a growing mountain of debt. Arthur, meanwhile, watched the escalating situation with a growing sense of unease. He saw Mateo's valiant, if futile, attempts to compromise. He saw the mounting stack of fine notices on Zia's desk, and he saw the toll it was taking on Mateo, the vibrant energy slowly draining from the young man's eyes. One evening, as Zia meticulously polished her collection of antique thimbles, Arthur decided he couldn't remain silent any longer. "Zia," he began, his voice softer than usual, "about Mateo. He's a good kid. He's just trying to make a living." Zia sighed, not looking up from a particularly ornate thimble. "He is disrupting the peace of Willow Creek, Arthur. And he is breaking the rules." "But the rules, are they always right?" Arthur ventured, a bold question for him. "Sometimes don't people need a little color, a little life? This community, it's beautiful, yes, but sometimes it feels a little sterile." Zia finally looked at him, her gaze sharp. "Sterile, Arthur. It is orderly, it is dignified. It is what our residents pay good money for." "But what about character?" Arthur pressed, emboldened by his own words. "What about community spirit? Mateo's food brings people together. I've seen it. Neighbors chatting, laughing. It's more than just food. It's an experience." Zia's lips thinned. "An experience that violates our foundational principles. We cannot have a free-for-all, Arthur. One colorful mural leads to another, then to mismatched mailboxes, then to unapproved garden gnomes. It's a slippery slope." "But what if there was an exception?" Arthur suggested, his heart pounding. "Just for him, a designated spot maybe, a few hours a week." Zia stood up, placing the thimble back in its velvet-lined box with a definitive click. "Arthur." Zia stood up, placing the thimble back in its velvet-lined box with a definitive click. "Arthur, the rules are the rules. To make an exception for one would be to invalidate the entire framework of our covenants. It would set a dangerous precedent. No, Mateo Rodriguez must comply, or he must leave." Arthur slumped back into his armchair, defeated. He knew that tone. It was the tone that ended all discussions, the tone that signaled Zia's unwavering conviction. He watched as the fines continued to accumulate, a silent testament to Mateo's stubbornness and Zia's iron will. The vibrant mural, now mostly hidden under a large, beige tarp, served as a sad metaphor for Mateo's fading hope. Mateo, however, was not entirely without allies. Mrs. Albright, emboldened by Arthur's quiet support and her own fondness for Mateo's cooking, started a hushed petition among a few of the more adventurous residents. They appreciated the convenience, the novelty, and frankly, the deliciousness of Mateo's munchies. They felt a pang of guilt seeing the young man struggle. The petition, carefully worded to avoid direct confrontation with Zia, simply requested a review of the commercial activity bylaws to explore opportunities for fostering local entrepreneurial spirit within Willow Creek while maintaining community standards. It was a delicate dance, a whisper against the roar of Zia's authority. The petition, bearing a modest but significant 25 signatures, landed on Zia's desk a week before the next HOA meeting. She read it, her lips pressed into a thin line, then placed it neatly in a folder labeled frivolous complaints. She would address it, of course, but only to reiterate the unchangeable nature of the covenants. Mateo, meanwhile, was at his wits' end. The fines were now well into the thousands, and he was barely breaking even. He had resorted to parking his truck just outside the Willow Creek gates, on the public road, for a few hours a day, hoping to catch some passing traffic. It was humiliating, and far from the thriving business he had envisioned. His dream was slowly being suffocated by bureaucracy. Then, an idea, born of desperation and a flash of his old entrepreneurial spirit, sparked in his mind. He remembered a clause in the covenants, Article 12, Section D, Subsection 2. Community events sponsored by the HOA may include temporary commercial vendors, subject to board approval and adherence to event-specific guidelines. He knew it was a long shot, but what if he could propose a community event? A Willow Creek Food Festival, perhaps. It would be HOA-sponsored, temporary, and would bring residents together. It was a loophole, a tiny crack in the formidable wall of Zia's regulations. He spent days meticulously crafting a proposal. He outlined a plan for a small, tasteful food festival in the community park, featuring local vendors, himself included, of course, but he presented it as a broader initiative. He emphasized community building, family fun, and even suggested a portion of the proceeds could go to a local charity. He even designed a mock-up flyer using muted, tasteful colors, a direct nod to Zia's aesthetic preferences. He presented it to Mrs. Albright first, who, after some initial hesitation, agreed to help him present it to the HOA board. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, thick with a palpable tension that even the perfectly manicured lawns couldn't disguise. The community room, usually sparsely attended, was surprisingly full. Word had spread about Mateo's situation and the petition and the proposed food festival. Residents, usually content to let Zia handle things, were curious, some even openly supportive of Mateo. Zia, seated at the head of the long oak table, surveyed the room with her usual unflappable demeanor. Arthur sat beside her, his gaze occasionally drifting to Mateo, who sat in the back, looking nervous but determined. The meeting proceeded through its usual agenda: budget reports, landscaping updates, a brief discussion about a rogue squirrel. Then, Zia reached the new business section. "First," she announced, her voice clear and resonant, "we have a petition signed by a small number of residents requesting a review of our commercial activity bylaws. While I appreciate the community's engagement, I must reiterate that our covenants are the bedrock of Willow Creek's appeal. They are carefully constructed to maintain property values and uphold our established aesthetic. Amending them for individual preferences would be a disservice to all residents." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "Therefore, the board sees no reason to revisit these established and vital regulations." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Mateo's heart sank. This was even more rigid than he'd anticipated. Next, Zia continued, her gaze sweeping over the room, we have a proposal for a Willow Creek Food Festival, submitted by Mr. Mateo Rodriguez. She picked up Mateo's carefully prepared document, holding it gingerly, as if it might spontaneously combust. Mr. Rodriguez, would you like to present your proposal? Mateo, heart-pounding, stood up and walked to the front. He took a deep breath, looking out at the faces, some curious, some skeptical, some openly encouraging. He saw Mrs. Albright nod subtly. He saw Arthur give him a small, almost imperceptible wink. Thank you, Mrs. Prescott, board members, residents, Mateo began, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. My proposal is for a community-wide food festival to be held in the park. It would be a chance for neighbors to connect, to enjoy delicious food from various local vendors, and to raise funds for the Willow Creek Community Beautification Project. He outlined his plan, emphasizing the family-friendly atmosphere, the diverse culinary offerings, and the potential for increased community engagement. He even showed his tasteful mock-up flyer, devoid of any flamboyant hues. When he finished, a smattering of polite applause broke out, quickly hushed by Zia's stern gaze. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, Zia said, her expression unreadable. A charming presentation. However, I must point out several significant issues. Firstly, while the concept of a community event is commendable, the involvement of various local vendors directly contradicts our commercial activity bylaws. Secondly, the logistics of such an event, parking, sanitation, security, would be considerable. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, the precedent this would set for future commercial endeavors within our residential community is a grave concern. She paused, then continued. While I appreciate your creativity, Mr. Rodriguez, the board cannot approve an event that so fundamentally undermines the very principles upon which Willow Creek was founded. The motion is denied. A collective sigh of disappointment swept through the room. Mateo felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He had really tried. He looked at Zia, her face a mask of resolute authority. He felt utterly defeated. Just as Zia was about to move on to the next item, a voice from the back of the room cut through the silence. Excuse me. Just as Zia was about to move on to the next item, a voice from the back of the room cut through the silence. Excuse me, Mrs. Prescott. It was Arthur. He stood up, his usually mild demeanor replaced by a surprising firmness. All eyes, including Zia's, turned to him. Zia's brow furrowed slightly. Arthur rarely spoke during HOA meetings, let alone interrupted her. Arthur, do you have a point of order? Zia asked, her voice laced with a hint of warning. I do, dear. A point of clarification, Arthur replied, his gaze unwavering as he met Zia's. You mentioned the covenants are the bedrock of Willow Creek, and you are absolutely right. They are designed to maintain our property values and uphold our established aesthetic. He paused, then looked directly at Mateo. But they are also designed to foster a thriving, harmonious community, aren't they? Zia blinked, caught off guard by his preamble. Of course, Arthur, that is implicit. And what fosters community more than people coming together? Arthur continued, his voice gaining strength. What fosters harmony more than shared experiences? Mateo's proposal, while perhaps unconventional, seeks to do just that. It seeks to bring life, and yes, color, to our community in a way that, frankly, our perfectly manicured lawns and muted color palettes sometimes fail to do. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, louder this time. Zia's eyes narrowed. Furthermore, Arthur pressed on, you cited Article 12, Section D, Subsection 2, which explicitly states that community events sponsored by the HOA may include temporary commercial vendors, subject to board approval and adherence to event-specific guidelines. Mateo's proposal is for an HOA-sponsored event. He has offered to adhere to event-specific guidelines to make it tasteful and appropriate. He has even volunteered to donate a portion of the proceeds to our beautification project, which I believe is currently underfunded. He turned to the other board members. distinguished colleagues, we pride ourselves on being a forward-thinking community, yet we seem intent on stifling innovation and community spirit in the name of rigid interpretation. Mateo Rodriguez is not trying to turn Willow Creek into a chaotic marketplace. He is offering a valuable service, a unique experience, and a chance for us to come together. To deny this outright, without even exploring the possibility of crafting appropriate, event-specific guidelines, is, I submit, a disservice to our community and a disservice to the very spirit of our covenants. He then looked at Zia, a gentle but firm challenge in his eyes. Zia, you have always championed the letter of the law. But sometimes, dear, the spirit of the law matters just as much, if not more. The room was silent. No one had ever spoken to Zia like that, especially not Arthur. Zia's face was a study in conflicting emotions, surprise, irritation, and a flicker of something that might have been respect for her husband's unexpected defiance. Then, Mrs. Albright, emboldened by Arthur's stand, spoke up. I agree with Arthur. Mateo's food is wonderful and his truck, well, it's charming. It adds character. And a food festival sounds like a delightful idea. We're not asking for chaos, Zia, just a little bit of joy. Other residents chimed in, their voices growing bolder. My kids would love a food festival. It's a great way to meet new people. We could really use something to liven things up. Zia held up a hand, silencing the growing chorus. She looked from Arthur to Mateo, then around the room. The tide had turned. She could feel it. Her absolute authority, once unshakable, was now being questioned, not just by a newcomer, but by her own husband and a significant portion of the community. To outright deny the proposal now, in the face of such unified sentiment, would be to risk alienating the very residents she aimed to govern. Her mind, precise and analytical, began to work. Arthur had highlighted the loophole, the provision for HOA-sponsored events. She had dismissed it too quickly. The covenants were her lifeblood, and Arthur had used them against her, albeit gently. Very well, Zia said, her voice still firm, but with a new edge of pragmatism. While I maintain my reservations about the potential for precedent and logistical challenges, Mr. Prescott has raised a valid point regarding Article 12, and the sentiment of the community is noted. She picked up Mateo's proposal again. The board will not approve the Willow Creek Food Festival as a permanent fixture, nor as a means to circumvent existing bylaws regarding commercial vehicles. However, she continued, her gaze settling on Mateo, we will consider approving an asterisk pilot program for a single, one-day Willow Creek culinary showcase to be held in the community park. Mr. Rodriguez, your truck, and perhaps one or two other approved asterisk vendors may participate. Mateo's jaw dropped. A pilot program, a culinary showcase. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. A huge start. Zia continued, laying down the terms. This showcase will be subject to strict guidelines. All vendors must submit to board approval. All signage must be tasteful and in keeping with community aesthetics. No loud music. No excessive waste. And Mr. Rodriguez, your vehicle, while permitted for this event, will still be subject to the existing Article 5, Section B, Subsection 1 for all other times it is parked within the community. The fines for your current violations will be suspended pending the successful execution of this pilot program and your commitment to future compliance. A wave of relief washed over Mateo. Suspended fines. A chance to prove himself. If this pilot program is successful, Zia concluded, the board will then consider the possibility of making it an annual event with potential adjustments to the relevant bylaws regarding temporary commercial activities. But let me be clear, this is an exception, not a rule. Compliance with all other covenants remains non-negotiable. The room erupted in applause, a genuine, heartfelt sound that echoed through the usually staid community room. Mateo beamed, relief and gratitude flooding him. He caught Arthur's eye, and this time, Arthur gave him a full, proud smile. Over the next few weeks, Mateo worked tirelessly with Mrs. Albright and even, surprisingly with Zia, to plan the Willow Creek Culinary Showcase. Zia, true to her word, was a stickler for details, but she was also surprisingly efficient and, in her own way, helpful. She ensured the permits were in order, the layout was optimal, and even suggested a local string quartet for ambience, a subtle nod to her aesthetic preferences. Mateo, in turn, found himself toning down his usual exuberance, opting for elegant chalkboard menus and subtle lighting, demonstrating his willingness to adapt. The culinary showcase was a resounding success. Residents flocked to the park, enjoying Mateo's delicious fare.